This question from Sam on Instagram. After a year out of football waiting for the perfect opportunity, only for him to end up at Fiorentina, is it fair to say, with hindsight, that David de Gea's season-long hiatus only ever damaged his prospect of joining a top European club? Well, Fiorentina, at least he'll have a purple patch.
Very good. More than the patch, you hope. You hope they'll have nice new kits. But I feel a little bit sorry for De Gea. And we talked in the main show a bit yesterday about market conditions. And I think De Gea was just a little bit of a victim of the way that the game changed. Not just in terms of the perception of what players should be paid, but in his case, the terms of what a goalkeeper should do.
Play with his feet.
Yes, because for a lot of his time at Manchester United, he was widely considered in England as the best goalkeeper in the Premier League and maybe even the best goalkeeper in the world. Now, I think that sort of cuts you off from the way that he was always looked at in Spain, because the way that he was looked at in Spain, David, and the way that he was looked at in England, very, very different.
Extremely. I think he made
which way?
I think he made a lot of quite high-profile gaffes for Spain. There's also, if you want to go right back as well, the way he left Atleti didn't go down with their fans very well. He left on bad terms. They don't really look back at him with any fondness as one of their own.
Do you think they like Courtois more than they like him?
Right, let's not get carried away.
What a choice.
Yeah. And then there was the whole fax saga with Man United and Real Madrid. And yes, and Real Madrid fans and Real Madrid and the members of the press that are big Real Madrid fans, shall we say, were not happy that he didn't really make more of a noise and try to force through that move. And he's not thought of kindly for that. So his reputation in Spain isn't particularly great. It's not, say, a Casillas, who's seen as an absolute golden boy legend there. And in regards to this move, I don't think he really wanted a top club. I think he's been in a high-pressure environment throughout his entire career at Man United, going through some highs and some extreme lows as well. I know he likes his music and his video games and streaming his video games. And no, genuinely, I'm being serious here as well. I don't think he wanted the pressures of elite European football anymore.
You think more players could do with a year off?
Absolutely. He's about to go.
I'm not joking. I'm genuinely asking.
I think this is a lovely move. You go to Fiorentina. You live in one of Europe's most beautiful cities. You get to play at a very good level in a very good league. A team that will chase for European places. If you don't guarantee Europe, you're not going to get absolutely battered. I think it's a lovely move for him out of this.
And I think it's clear that he's doing it for the experience rather than anything else, because clearly he's wealthy enough to retire if he wanted to, and a lot of people assumed he was going to, because people do assume that if you're a year out of the game.
His missus has got her own career as well, so she does her own thing as well. It's easy between Spain and Italy, extremely easy. It just works out really well.
Yeah, and I think, you look at what he's getting paid compared to what he was getting paid at Manchester United. I think it works out like something like a 90% wage cut. But yeah, the game just moved on. And I think the thing with De Gea is his reputation as being one of the best, if not the best, in England was built on the fact that he was keeping goal behind a declining Manchester United team, and he was having to make a lot of saves. But is that the sort of performance that gets you bought by a top club? I don't think it is.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, all great goalkeepers need to be able to make great saves, but you need to be tidy with your feet. Concentration is important. All those sort of things. Is not being a goalkeeper for one of the best teams in Europe is not about being busy all game. It's about being busy for basically none of the game, especially in an era where there's such a big gap between the haves and the have-nots. We are used to seeing we are used to seeing on a weekly basis a lot of games in our top divisions over Europe in which one team absolutely batters the other, whether that be PSG, Bayern, whoever else. Is De Gea the ideal goalkeeper for that kind of team? I'm not convinced he is. Going back to Sam's question, I think the season-long hiatus is at least partially forced. And I don't think there was necessarily that prospect of him joining an absolutely elite European club anyway.
But Andy was suggesting that maybe all players need a year off, whereas Sam on Instagram is suggesting that with hindsight, that a season-long hiatus may damage your prospects of joining a top club. Where do you find yourself on this? A season off or not?
It depends where you see your career and what you want from your career. If you still believe that you can, you're good enough to compete for trophies at the very top level. I just think De Gea, he's had a lot of offers. I know for a fact he's had a lot of offers while he's been away. He's been waiting for the right one. He's had a lot of money chucked at him, and he could have taken a lot more money than he's got now from Fiorentina. But he decided not to. He decided, like I said, like Andy said, he's comfortable. And I will say, just to close out this De Gea point, by the way, that I think if Man United's new owners really want to curry a bit more favour with their fans, he has to be invited back to Old Trafford at some point and get a proper send-off. Because I thought it was really poor the way they treated him at the end, considering what all he'd done for the club. And I think that let down a lot of fans. So if they want to do, I think they should absolutely do that, because he's an absolute fantastic player for Man United.
Question from Rachel on Instagram. 2 clubs have caught my eye this summer for their business with some exciting young players, Monaco and Leipzig. Would be fascinated to hear your views and who you think has had the smarter window, David.
I mean, you look at Monaco and Leipzig this window so far, just the definition of smart, astute buying with a lot of foresight. Relatively low fees in the current market for players with huge ceilings. And I've picked 2 deals out that I'd really, really liked. So Christian Mawissa went from Toulouse to Monaco, 16 million. Brilliant young centre-back, full-back, left-footed, which everybody loves right now, but he plays right-sided of defence. Brilliant physical, technical talent, who I think if he's still at Monaco this time next window, I'll be astonished if he progresses how I think he's going to progress. And then another player who he's linked with quite a lot of Premier League clubs as well, and that's Antonio Nusa, who went from Club Brugge to Leipzig. He's going to be Danny Olmo's replacement there. So they've got the Olmo money in, and for under half of that money, they've managed to get his replacement in, again, just another rapid, technically gifted left winger. Brilliant in 1v1 situations, and again, he's somebody big clubs are going to be looking at in a year's time, saying, why didn't we get him then? So I admire this sort of these windows from these clubs. Very, very smart, I think.
Yeah, because like this time last year, Antonio Nusa was very close to going to Spurs, didn't. Obviously will be a running mate of Holland, Odegaard, Sorloth for Norway going forward. He still needs to find more consistency. But I think Leipzig have taken an opportunity here because they really didn't want to lose Danny Olmo. They did. Marco Rosa talked about it. He said, well, there's no way of directly replacing Danny Olmo on a footballing level or on a human level. But what we can do is use it as an opportunity to get another creative player that we wouldn't have done otherwise. And this feels to me like quite a one-off opportunity for them to go and get Nusa. They've done that. I think it's a great place for him to develop. And I think both with Leipzig and Monaco, you look at Lamine Camara, who's come over from Metz, who had himself a real game when Monaco won 3-0 at Barcelona in the Johan Gamper Trophy this week, when we were saying how tough things were for Barcelona. We didn't even get to talk yesterday. We didn't even get to talking about what they've looked like on the pitch. But Camara, I think, is going to turn into a really good player. And the thing is, these players, you can see them turning into good players because of where they've chosen to go. And I think much more than, say, Dortmund, who have this reputation for developing young players, although they're doing a slightly different recruitment model now. If you are a player who wants to find their way to the absolute elite of European football, you're thinking Monaco or Leipzig now. And I think that is a great position for those clubs to be in, to know that players know, you could be the next Mbappe or Bernardo Silva or Dani Olmo or whoever, or Gvardiol or whoever else. The names that they have developed, not necessarily produced, but developed, it absolutely speaks for them. And of course, they can get a year or two's brilliant service out of these players and then move them on. And I just wonder, if you're Dortmund, for example, do you look back and think, yeah, I kind of wish we were still in that spot?
Yeah, is it by design? Do you think that Monaco and Leipzig have got to where they are today? Do they have a great scout, or whether it be technical advisor or whatever it might be? Or is it by circumstances? We've talked a lot about the current sort of financial circumstances that a lot of European clubs find themselves in. And so that forces you, doesn't it, to maybe rethink the way that you sign players and what you focus on?
I don't think it's one or the other. I think the two things can combine here. I think both clubs have clearly got unbelievable networks all across the globe. And they've also got particular financial restraints. Monaco can't spend like a PSG. Leipzig can't spend like a Bayern. So you look at the area of the market that you can identify and tap into and target those players. And that's what they've done. Mouissa came from Toulouse as well. And then, for instance, and that's just a nice level for Monaco. It's a clear step up for him to go to Monaco. It's not a major step, but just a nice one in his development. It's like what Andy touched upon. Nice place for development.
I mean, they're not spending nothing. We have to say that. They're spending decent-sized transfer fees. But I think really the work that you've done with the previous players, like I said, it does a lot of your recruitment for you. I mean, we talked about the Dortmund thing. One of the interesting moves that Monaco have made just in the last couple of days is Paris Brunner, the 18-year-old striker who's gone from Dortmund to Monaco, because he thought, well, I'm not going to get a game for Dortmund yet. You've just bought Guirassy. You've got other forwards. He couldn't see the map for him to get into the team, and so he chose to go to Monaco to move abroad and to go to a place where he thought, okay, this is an authentic finishing school.
Kylian Mbappe was there.
Yeah.
Say no more. Ashby on Instagram says, after retaining the services of Martin Zubimendi, what are the chances of Real Sociedad breaking into La Liga top 4 and progressing in the Europa League? Could they even challenge for a trophy this season?
I don't think it's a challenge for a trophy, but there'll be a thorn in the side of everybody else who is. It was paramount that they kept Zubimendi, I thought, because it looked at one point like Marino and Zubimendi were going to go, and I was a bit concerned for them, but it's turned out that Zubimendi stays. Marino, it's still up in the air as we put this out. So yeah, he's a cornerstone player for them. Him and Mikel Oyarzabal, these are the players that this club are built around. Not just their style on the pitch, but also off it as well. They're examples. So I think Real Sociedad will have another very, very impressive season. They've kept the nucleus of the squad together, which I think is vitally important for them. And Bryce Mendes still there as well, who I absolutely adore, who doesn't get talked about enough for me. So they're going to be a great side again, and I'm really, really glad to see Zubimendi stay, just like Oyarzabal a few years ago when he had big money offers as well. It's just nice. It's a bit of a throwback. It's a bit of a rarity now, seeing a player stay loyal to his local club. Could have earned a lot more money, could have been in a bigger league, in a bigger team, but he wants to stay at home.
And this is why they differ slightly, I think, from Monaco and Leipzig, because, of course, Real Sociedad are prolific producers as well as developers of players. And we've seen that with what Spain were able to do in the Euros. But I think as well it's about creating a feeling there. So, of course, we talk a lot about Athletic, and we talked in the main show yesterday about Nico Williams, and he seems to be in no particular rush to leave Athletic, which perhaps he wouldn't feel that pull at another club. But I think people don't talk enough about what Real Sociedad have managed to do. The amount of players, homegrown players, that were in the team that got them in the Champions League is remarkable. And of course, this creates the knock-on effect of like people, like young players want to be part of that. So you look at Sergio Gomez coming over from Manchester City. You look at Luka Sucic, who I think will turn into a really good player there.
Big fan, really like him.
As well. Yeah. And I think because they have got a coach who really understands that sort of youth development thing in Imanol, they've got not the biggest name coach, but absolutely the right coach for what they're trying to do.
He coached most of them when they were 14, 15, 16.
Yeah, exactly.
And now he's got them when they're a lot older, so he knows their personalities. He knows everything about it. There's just a lovely atmosphere about these clubs. Look, we've discussed Athletic and Real Sociedad a lot on these podcasts, but there is just a beautiful atmosphere about the place. Very family orientated, I think.
Yeah, the culture is what we've talked about, and that's what OTC does, as well as talk about the football, obviously. This from Duncan on email. I'm curious about why there's seemingly no market interest for Jonathan David. Lille are willing sellers, and he's consistently been one of the top goal scorers in the big 5 leagues in recent years. Why, then, despite his reasonable valuation, has David not made a move away from the club?
I suppose it depends on your definition of reasonable valuation, really, doesn't it? At this point, they're not going to give him away because they would want to replace him, and he will be difficult to replace. As Duncan says, he's a very consistent goal scorer. And is it worth at this point just keeping him through to the end of his contract? He's got a year left on his contract, of course. And at the moment, it looks like he'll run it through to its conclusion in 2025. David's been in a really... Jonathan David, not this David, has been in a really difficult position for a couple of summers, really, because he is a striker that a lot of clubs like, and a lot of big clubs like, and a lot of Premier League clubs like. He's also absolutely no one's first choice. So until he goes on and proves it at the next level, and I mean by that an absolutely elite level club, no one will really have him as that first choice. So really, he can't prove it without going, and he can't go without proving it. But when you look at him, I think this week is a really good week to discuss it because, of course, Lille squeezed through in extra time against Fenerbahce in the Champions League, and obviously Jose Mourinho was quite grumpy about that, and he deserved to be. They were probably the better team over the 2 legs. David created the penalty and got the penalty right at the end of extra time, and in like one of the scariest grounds in European football at Sugu Sadakolu with about 20 Lille fans there, he never looked like missing the penalty. Like, absolutely on top of it, ice cold, and someone who he's not a striker who can do it all, but he's quick, he runs the channels, he's so technically neat and tidy as around the box, as well as being a good finisher. I think the situation he's in at the moment, like I said, he's no one's really real first choice, but next summer when he's available for free, I reckon he'll have a massive list of suitors.
I have a question for you. Do you actually think he is good enough for the next level from what you've seen?
I think he's good enough for a next level. That's the thing. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what
I think that's the whole problem, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Because I feel like if I was West Ham signing him, or Aston Villa if they didn't have Ollie Watkins signing him, I'd feel comfortable with that. You do wonder until he gets there, is he a player for a Chelsea or an Arsenal? I think you can tell the lack of interest from them is perhaps that they don't think so. And obviously part of it is the fact that he definitely thinks he can make that next
level. Did you ask that question? Why are you not convinced, David?
Because I'm always... He's at a club in Lille and he's been there a while, and we've been talking about Jonathan David for a number of years now, and he's never moved. So what are big clubs seeing? What are they looking at and going, he's not our, like you said, he's our third choice, he's our second choice, he's not our first choice. What makes him not first choice?
But if you go back, part of it's the valuation, isn't it? Firstly, Lille's valuation of him and his valuation of himself, because he clearly thinks he can break through that glass ceiling. And if you look at his numbers, fair enough, he's got every right to think that. But I think if you go back even a year, if clubs are asking about him, Lille are going, all right, you put 50, 60 million on the table and we'll talk about it. And clubs are like, whoa, I don't know about that. And I think to sell a striker of quality for what he's worth in this market is difficult. It's really difficult. At this point, with a year left on his contract, what amount of money makes it worth Lille selling him? Yeah. And I would say the amount of money that would make Lille worth selling him, make it worthwhile for Lille to sell him, is just not on the table.
No, it's just interesting. Like I say, it's been a few years now. We've been talking about him, and a lot of strikers have moved. And a lot of strikers who are, say, young and quite inexperienced have moved for a lot of money as well. Yet still, no one's going to go, oh, I'll pay 50 million for Jonathan David.
That's the funny thing, though, isn't it?
That's what intrigues me. Yeah, that's where I'm...
Clubs would rather pay for potential than they would pay for someone who's proven. And it's funny because Xerxes, being a couple of years younger, far less proven than Jonathan David.
Great example.
You might argue he has a higher ceiling and is maybe a slightly more atypical sort of striker and maybe a little bit versatile. But I wouldn't have been rushing out to pay Xerxes' release clause given that the amount of evidence that there actually is on him at the elite level.
Fascinating. This from Demi on Instagram. After a fairy tale return to Udinese for Alexis Sanchez, has the Chilean still got what it takes to light up a European league with the flair and skill we so regularly saw at Barcelona, Arsenal and Marseille? Perhaps not at Manchester United.
I'm delighted to see him make this move.
Me too.
To a place where he will be considered important. It's a great end to his European career, as it almost certainly will be. I think it was so frustrating really last season because he went back to Inter last summer to be part of a winning team. But the way that Inter roll is with 4 good strikers. So he was only ever going to get like minutes off the bench and games here and there. That's not him. He needs to be the centre of everything. And he deserves to be the centre of everything. If you go back to the year before at Marseille, now, as we're going to see this season, not everyone is cut out to play for Marseille. It is like horrendous pressure. It's really difficult, big demands, and he put the team on his back and then some. He didn't just score the goals. He was someone who just animated the whole front part of the team because he's got the drive and he's got the personality to do that. Now, if you're putting him in a situation after that return of Inter where, well, you can be part of a winning culture, but you're going to have to give up most of what you're good at, it's not much of a trade-off, I think. And I wonder if that move was a mistake. He talked about going back to Marseille this summer. The deal didn't quite come together for a variety of reasons. But he is someone who, when he goes back to Udinese, he will be the centre of that team. And, of course, they love him particularly from being there the first time as well.
And what a time that first time was.
Yeah.
2010, 2011, Udinese, Guidolin with that team. Handanovic, Di Natale, Isla, Badu, Basta, Pinzi. I mean,
if you're an Udinese fan listening to this, you're crying at how good your team used to be.
I just absolutely used to love enjoying them. Just that the teams that they used to put out and the style of player, it was just interesting. Zapata was there as well. They had this brilliant mix of just had a few South Americans, a few Italian players, and then a few just scattered about. They had Inle, for instance, just from, and when their scouting was just really thriving on the top of everybody's, I thought.
I think that's it. You know the Pozzo family for Watford particularly, and Granada now as well, and the whole multi-club model. But actually, if you go back to the beginning, what they were so good at is having a scouting network in South America that was the envy of everyone. And David just lifted some of those players that came through. Alexis was probably the biggest one. Yeah. And of course, they managed to sell him to Barcelona at a massive profit. But that's really where the Pozzos built their reputation. And, they've come to mean something else. But this is going back to the origins, not just for Alexis Sanchez, but for Udinese as well. And look, since that model's fallen to bits, they've had a really, really hard couple of years. And so really for those fans, just to get a little bit of joy, I think is a great thing. Look, I don't think they're going to qualify for Europe or anything like that. If he can get them in the top half of the table, that's a really successful season. And that will have meant that he's done very, very well indeed.
Has he still got that huge Alsatian dog? No, I'm just wondering because,
there were two of them, weren't there?
Were there two of them?
Yeah, there were two.
I was just wondering how many stamps they've got in their passport by this stage. I'm just checking.